Tonight, we're not sugarcoating anything. We're going straight into the mud, the blood, and the fear that defined life in the trenches of World War I. No glory, no heroes, just men, trapped between death and survival, one brutal day at a time. Before we begin, hit like and subscribe if you want more of these unfiltered stories, but only if you mean it, and let me know in the comments where you're listening from, and what time it is. It's always something real to hold on to in a world like this. Now kill the lights, let the room go cold if you can, and prepare yourself for a journey into one of the darkest chapters of human history. I first set eyes on the trenches on a grey afternoon in early 1915. The sky hangs low and colourless over northern France as our company trudges the last mile towards the front. My uniform, once crisp and new, is already smeared with mud from stumbling through shell-churned fields. A distant artillery rumble has been our constant companion, a dull thunder that I feel in my chest as much as hear. I steal a glance at my friend, Private James Miller, marching at my side. James offers a tight, nervous smile. Like me, he's 19, and fresh from training, his cheeks still carrying a trace of boyhood softness under a scraggly attempt at a mustache. Neither of us truly knows what awaits us out here. When we reach the reserve line, the sight before me makes me stop in my tracks. Zigzagging across a once verdant field is a maze of trenches, more primitive and horrifying than anything I imagined. Walls of earth reinforced with sandbags and wooden planks carve a wound in the landscape. The mud is everywhere, a clinging grey-brown muck that sucks at my boots with each step. A rotten stench assaults my nose, a mix of wet earth, unwashed bodies, and latrine odours, mingled with something sickly sweet, the unmistakable smell of decaying flesh and old blood. Clouds of fat, dirty flies buzz around, drawn by the carrion and filth. I gag, quickly pressing a sleeve to my face. A veteran soldier standing nearby notices my reaction and lets out a grim chuckle. "Smell that, lad," he says, voice rough. "That's the smell of the Western Front. Gets in your clothes and never really leaves." He slaps a hand on my shoulder, not unkindly, and guides us down into the support trench. It's narrower than I expected. I have to hunch to avoid the earthen parapet above. Boards line the bottom in places, but many are missing or broken, so my feet sink into icy sludge. Water pools ankle deep where the duckboards have floated away. I hear James mutter a curse as he nearly loses his balance behind me. We shuffle along the twisting path. The walls are high enough that I only occasionally catch a glimpse of the surrounding land when I pass a break or firing step. What I see is devastation. Shattered tree stumps and tangles of barbed wire, stretches of ground pockmarked with craters filled with brackish water. In one, I think I see the limp shape of a dead horse, belly up and legs jutting stiffly. I quickly look away, heart pounding. Finally, we reach our platoon's section of the front-line trench. An officer directs us to duck into a dugout, a small cave-like shelter dug into the trench wall, shored up with sandbags and timber. Inside it's dim and cramped, lit by a single sputtering oil lamp. The air is thick with the smell of damp earth and cigarette smoke. There are two other men in the dugout, huddled in great coats. They look up as we enter, revealing young faces aged beyond their years. One soldier's eyes are bloodshot, with dark circles that speak of chronic sleeplessness. "Reinforcements, eh?" he says tiredly. "Welcome to paradise." James and I exchange uncertain looks. We stash our rifles and packs against the wall and squeeze in. The others introduce themselves. Corporal Thompson, a lanky man with a patchy beard, and Private Andrews, a quiet fellow who merely nods. Thompson immediately launches into instructions. The layout of the trench where the nearest latrine bucket is, down left but it's overflowing, mind you, and how to find the company sergeant if needed. As he talks, I try to take it all in, the new names, the acronyms and slang that pepper his speech, but my attention keeps wandering to the scratching sound of something in the corner. Rats. Two enormous rats scurry along the dugout wall, bold as anything. One pauses to sniff at a sack of what I assume is our rations. In the dim light, I see its fur is matted and its eyes gleam. Thompson sees where my gaze has drifted and snorts. "You'll be bunking with those little bastards too," he says. "Get used to it. They're the real owners of these trenches." big as cats and fearless, gorged on the flesh of the dead. I'd rather face a battalion of Jerrys than those rats any day. I suppress a shiver of disgust. I've never seen rats so large. James nudges me and offers half a grin. I think I prefer the sergeant's company, he whispers, attempting humor. Our introduction is cut short by a sudden shrill whistle from outside. Thompson straightens. "Stand to," he barks. Even as fresh recruits, we know what that means. At dawn and dusk, every soldier must man the fire step, rifle ready, in case of an enemy attack during the traditional hour of surprise. In our nervous haste, James and I nearly trip over each other grabbing our rifles. We spill out of the dugout and clamber up onto the fire step, a ledge of earth that allows us to peer over the top if we crouch just enough. My heart is thudding in my chest. The top of the trench, the parapet, is just at my eye level when I stand on the step. It's reinforced with sandbags. I carefully position my rifle and steel helmet, trying to remember my training. Don't silhouette your head against the sky. Keep low. The light is fading towards evening. Across the torn earth of no man's land, I see the hazy outline of the German trenches perhaps a few hundred yards away. Between us and them lies a wasteland of barbed wire and shell craters. It's eerily quiet for a moment, just the sigh of wind and an occasional distant crack of rifle fire. My eyes strain to catch movement out in front. I see none, but the stillness itself is ominous. Suddenly, a flare shoots up from the enemy line, bursting overhead in a harsh white light. No man's land is illuminated in stark, ghostly brightness. Every jagged tree stump and coil of wire stands out in sharp detail. I duck instinctively, pressing myself against the trench wall. In the harsh shadows, I notice what I hadn't before. Just beyond our wire, there are dark shapes lying on the ground. I squint and my stomach clenches as I realize they are bodies, British soldiers from an earlier attack, or victims of patrols caught in the open. Some are tangled in wire. One corpse is propped on its knees, caught on a snag, as if still praying. The flare hisses out, plunging the landscape back into twilight gloom. But the afterimage of that grisly scene remains imprinted on my mind. My hands tremble on my rifle. A few rifle shots ring out from our left, cracking the silence. Then a whoosh and a deafening blast. A mortar shell explodes somewhere down the trench line, sending a shower of mud and debris. I flinch, and dirt patters down on my helmet. Shouts echo up and down the line. I grip my weapon tighter, knuckles white. I expect at any second to hear the German war cry and see dark figures charging through the smoke, but the attack doesn't come. After a tense quarter hour, the alarm is called off. Stand to is over, and dusk has settled fully into night. We climb down, relief and exhaustion washing over me in equal measure. Thompson claps me on the back. "Not too bad. For your first stand to, eh?" he says. I nod mutely, my heart still pounding. I realize my undershirt is soaked with sweat, despite the evening chill. As darkness falls, James and I are assigned sentry duty for the first watch of the night. Thompson leads us to a firing bay, where we are to take turns keeping watch over no man's land. 2 hours on, 2 off. Don't fall asleep, he warns sternly. If Jerry decides to raid, you raise the alarm. And for God's sake, keep your heads down, unless you want a sniper to take it off. We nod earnestly. Once Thompson leaves, James and I exchange a look. In the faint moonlight that creeps into the trench, I see his face. He looks as scared as I feel. "I guess this is it," he whispers. "This is it," I reply softly. I attempt a small smile. "We'll manage. Just like training, right?" He doesn't answer, and we both know the truth. Nothing in training truly prepared us for this reality. I take the first shift. Propping my rifle on the parapet edge, I peer through a gap in the sandbags into the darkness ahead. My eyes slowly adjust. The night is cold and moonlit. Patchy clouds drift across the sky. The battlefield is a monochrome expanse of greys and blacks. Occasionally, a flare from one side or the other streaks upward and casts its unearthly light. During those moments, I hold my breath and scan for movement. All I see are spectral shapes of destroyed wagons and corpses from battles past. The silence is broken sporadically by distant artillery rumbles and the crack of sniper fire. A bullet snaps overhead with a sound like a giant angry bee, and I reflexively duck, though it was far above. In the quiet stretches, my mind wanders. I think of home, of my mother and father, back in Somerset, likely sitting down to supper around now. I wonder if they miss me terribly yet, or if my mother still believes I'll be home by Christmas, as everyone said when I enlisted last year. I was so swept up in the excitement and patriotic fervor then, convinced it was the right thing, the honorable thing, to do. I remember parading through the village in my new uniform, how proud I was. That feels like another lifetime now. 2 hours crawl by. At some point, James shakes me gently. I had nearly dozed off, lulled by the cool air and my own fatigue. We switch places, and now it's my turn to sit at the bottom of the trench, trying to stay awake while he watches. I hug my rifle across my chest and close my eyes for a moment, only intending to rest them. I must have drifted into a light sleep because I jolt awake to James hissing my name. Edward, Ed, wake up! My heart leaps and I scramble up, fearing an attack. But it's not the enemy. Instead, I see a shape on the ground by our feet, wriggling in the dirt. It takes a second to process what I'm seeing. It's one of those huge rats. The creature is latched onto something, a piece of cloth protruding from the side of the trench. No, not cloth, it's skin. The rat is tugging at the remains of a dead soldier half buried in the wall. An unburied casualty that became part of the trench parapet itself. The realization makes bile rise in my throat. I recoil, swearing, and James drives the butt of his rifle at the rat. The beast squeals and scampers off into the dark. But the awful image remains. The rat had been eating that dead man, and we two nearly stepped on him without noticing. We stand there in shock for a moment, until Corporal Thompson comes over to see what the fuss is. He grimaces when he spots the half-buried body. Poor sod, he mutters. Not the first to become part of the trench wall. In some places, they've even used corpses to shore up the parapets when sandbags ran low. His tone is matter of fact, but it sends a chill through me. That could be any of us, I realize. A shudder runs through me that has nothing to do with the cold. Before either of us can speak further, there's a commotion a short way down the trench. A soldier rushes by, gasping something about wiring party under fire. Our ears perk. We later learn that a group of our men had gone out into no man's land to repair our barbed wire barricade in the darkness, and the Germans sent up a flare, catching them in the open. Now the enemy machine guns chatter, stitching the night with red traces. We listen to the frantic rattle of bullets hitting the wire and ground. Faint cries of pain drift over the earth. Eventually it ceases, and a deathly stillness falls. Welcome to the trenches. I think to myself bitterly. It's been mere hours, and already I've seen enough to banish any illusions I held. There is a crushing realization settling on me that this war is not glorious or heroic, but a grim ordeal of endurance. As I lean against the cold trench wall, exhaustion gnawing at my bones, I pray silently that I will find the strength to survive this hellscape one day at a time. A few weeks pass, and trench life becomes our grim new normal. The days settle into a routine of sorts. I quickly learn the daily ritual. Stand to at first light with bayonet fixed, nervously peering over the parapet for a possible dawn attack that more often than not doesn't come. Then a meager breakfast, if you can call it that. Usually tea and bland rations. Private Andrews, the quiet soldier we met upon arrival, shows us how to get a small stove going using bits of wood and sandbags as fuel. It's hardly enough to warm anything, but we try anyway. The tea we manage to brew is always lukewarm and has an odd chemical taste. Someone explains it's because the water is delivered in old petrol cans. Indeed, every sip carries a tang of gasoline. By the time it reaches our mugs, the tea is half cold and tastes of petrol. If we're lucky, a bit of fatty bacon accompanies it, but it's invariably cold and greasy by the time it reaches us. I wrinkle my nose but gulp it down. It's better than going hungry. After breakfast, the trench comes alive with chores. In our sector, that means filling sandbags, draining water from shell holes, and repairing any damage from the night's shelling. The officers believe busy hands keep men from brooding on fear. Perhaps they're right, but it's hard to think of anything but fear when you're shoveling mud next to a fragment of a human skull, half buried in the trench wall, or when each sandbag you lift squelches with foul brown water that stinks of sewage. Still, I force myself to focus on the tasks. It's better than doing nothing and letting dread creep in. During lulls, we snatch rest, where we can. I've become adept at catching a few minutes of sleep, even with the roar of distant artillery in my... The body learns to cope. It must. My skin crawls with another torment that has become impossible to ignore: lice. By our second week at the front, James and I are both scratching incessantly at our scalps and bodies. At night, under the glow of a dim lantern, I pick at the seams of my filthy uniform and find them teeming with tiny white lice. We crush as many as we can between our fingernails, a practice known as chatting, but it's a losing battle. One evening, as I'm contorting myself to scratch at a maddening itch on my back, Corporal Thompson looks on in amusement. "Got the trench pets, eh?" he chuckles. I grimace and nod, cursing as another louse bites at my waist. Thompson lights a cigarette, the flame illuminating his gaunt face, and philosophizes. "They always say the lice bite the new lads worst. Fresh meat, see. Once you've been here a while, they'll leave you alone, or you'll be too bloody numb to care." He flicks ash and adds, "Biggest damn nuisance in the army, these lice. You can fight the Germans, but you can't fight them." He's not wrong. The lice are everywhere, an invisible army tormenting us day and night. I've scratched myself raw in places. Along with the filth and constant damp, they've given many of us a persistent feverish malaise we jokingly call trench fever. There's nothing to do but endure it. A trip to the medic would just get us a shrug and some nasty smelling ointment that doesn't really work. When not working or itching, we try to distract ourselves. Some men quietly write letters during spare moments. I do the same, scribbling in a notebook with a stub of pencil. At first I find it hard to know what to tell my family. I don't want to worry them, so I leave out the worst details, which are most of them. Instead, I write about how proud I am to be here with my comrades, and about the funny French phrases I've picked up, or how we joke to pass time. I mention that the weather has been cold and rainy, but I assure them I'm in good health and spirits. Censorship hangs over every letter. We know officers will blot out anything too revealing. But even without that, I wouldn't unload the horrors of this place onto those at home. One drizzly afternoon, I finish writing a letter to my parents. "Dear Mum and Dad, I hope you are both well. I am doing fine, keeping warm as winter approaches. James is here with me, and we look after each other. The food is a bit repetitive. I would give anything for one of Mum's home-cooked pies. But we make do and even have hot tea most days. Life in the trenches has its muddy moments, but my spirits remain high, thanks to the camaraderie of the lads. We share jokes and stories to pass the time. Please try not to worry too much. I'm as safe as can be, and we all believe this war will be over sooner rather than later. Give my love to little Sarah and Grandma. Your loving son, Edward." Reading over my own words, I half smile at the optimistic tone. It's far from the whole truth, but perhaps it will bring them some comfort. I know my mother will cling to every word. I carefully fold the paper and slide it into an envelope to be collected by the postal orderly. For a moment, I allow myself to imagine it arriving at our cottage in Somerset. My mother reading it by the fireplace. The image is almost too painful to dwell on, so I tuck it away and turn back to reality. That evening, our small group in the dugout tries to maintain some cheer. Thompson is telling a story about a brawl in a French estaminet, a sort of cafe he visited while on leave, complete with wild hand gestures that make James laugh. Private Andrews cracks a rare smile. I find myself laughing too, a fleeting feeling of normalcy washing over us. For a moment, the war seems distant as we sit in the candle-lit gloom sharing a joke. Andrews has been with us for a few weeks now, and though he speaks little, he's begun to open up. Under the safe cover of darkness, he shyly pulls out a creased photograph from inside his tunic to show me. In it, a pretty young woman cradles a newborn baby, his wife and infant son, he explains softly. The boy was born just before Andrews shipped out. We pass the photo around, offering quiet words of admiration and encouragement. Andrews promises that when he gets home, he'll take his boy to the seaside to make up for lost time. There's a tender longing in his voice that reminds me of my own father, and it makes my chest ache. The moment is shattered in an instant. Without warning, a sharp crack rings out. The unmistakable report of a sniper's rifle. I flinch down instinctively. "Sniper, get down," someone yells. In the same second, I see Private Andrews slump backwards as if someone suddenly tugged him by the shoulders. The photograph slips from his fingers into the mud. A red mist hangs in the air, where his head was a heartbeat ago. I'm frozen, staring in horror at Andrews, who now lies motionless against the trench wall. A dark red hole is punched through his steel helmet above his ear. James curses, diving low, and drags me fully down. My ears are ringing, and my mind cannot comprehend what just happened. One moment we were laughing, talking about home. The next, Andrews is gone. Just like that. Corporal Thompson is already shouting for no one to show their heads. We crouch in the muck, tense and breathing hard, expecting more shots. None come. It seems the single crack was all. Perhaps the sniper took a lone opportunistic shot at the glow of our cigarette, or voices, and then faded away. It's eerily quiet again, save for the pounding of blood in my ears. I crawl a few feet to Andrews. My hands shake as I reach for him. The side of his helmet is dented and blood seeps down his cheek. His eyes stare blankly, and there's no doubt the entry wound was precise. A trickle of blood and brain matter mixes with the mud beneath his head. Bile rises in my throat. This is the first time I've seen one of my comrades killed so close, so suddenly. My chest constricts with a feeling I can't even name. Part terror, part fury, part overwhelming sorrow. Thompson lays a hand on my shoulder, his face grim in the flickering lamplight. "Stay down, lad. There's nothing we can do for him now." I nod numbly. James whispers a shaky prayer under his breath. None of us move for a long minute, eyes fixed on the lifeless form that so recently was our friend. Eventually, one of the other men carefully pulls a tarp over Andrew's body, covering that vacant, accusing stare. The photograph of his wife and child is still lying in the mud, speckled with blood drops. I pick it up with trembling fingers and wipe it as clean as I can on my sleeve, my vision blurring with tears. I refuse to let fall. I fold the photo and slip it into Andrew's pocket, swallowing the lump in my throat. It's only later that night, under the safety of full darkness, that we carry Andrew's body out of the trench. Two of his closest mates take him to the rear, for burial. I offer to help, but Thompson gently refuses, probably seeing how shaken I am. As they disappear down the communication trench, I sag against the wall and breathe in and out slowly, trying to steady myself. The war feels more personal than ever. I think of the poor young woman who will receive a telegram about this, and the boy who will never meet his father. Any illusions I had left shatter completely that night. There is no invincibility here, no guarantee the next bullet or shell won't find me. Death can come at any time, while eating, talking, even laughing, snatching life away in an instant and leaving nothing but blood and emptiness behind. Perhaps to channel our grief into something, or perhaps by cruel coincidence orders come down the next day that our platoon will take part in a raid on the enemy trenches. The officers frame it as a chance to gather intelligence and keep the Germans on their toes. But we all know it's also about revenge. Word of Andrew's death spread through our company, and there's simmering anger. He was well liked despite his quiet nature. I see it in James's eyes too. Normally warm and hesitant, they're now cold and hard at the mention of the raid. I feel a chill as I realize the same is true of my own. The fear is still there, yes, coiling in my gut, but now it's alongside a raw desire to strike back. That night, a little after midnight, some 15 of us assemble in a support trench nearest to a section of our wire where engineers have cut a gap for us to slip through. We've blackened our faces with soot and mud to avoid being seen in the flare light. Each man is stripped of identifying badges and letters to prevent giving the enemy intel if we're captured or killed. Our bayonets are fixed and rifles loaded. I run my tongue over my dry lips repeatedly. No matter how much water I sip from my canteen, my mouth is parched with dread. Thompson gives us final instructions in a hushed whisper. We'll crawl on our bellies through no man's land to a knotted clump of wire about halfway, then wait for the signal. A single flare to rush the remaining distance to the German trench. In and out quick. Grab prisoners if possible, throw grenades, map out their trench layout if we can, then back before they muster a counterattack. It sounds straightforward in theory. In practice, my heart hammers like it will burst through my ribs. James is just ahead of me in the file, as we silently climb out of our trench. The night is moonless and drizzling rain, good for cover, bad for the soul. Each raindrop trickles cold down my neck as I flatten myself and start crawling across the churned earth. The mud is deep in places, sucking at my arms and legs. I grip my rifle tightly, trying not to stab myself with my own bayonet as I wriggle forward like a worm. Every inch of advance is a small victory over my screaming nerves. We pass the corpse of a man tangled in our wire, one of the wiring party who was caught out a few nights ago, I realize. The body gives off a faint odor even in the damp chill. I force my eyes ahead. The only sounds are our labored breaths and the squelch of mud. Somewhere to our left, a faint groan comes from another wounded or dying soul in no man's land, but we have to ignore it. Halfway across, we reach the shattered remains of an old tree stump, which marks the rally. There we pause, pressed low. My breathing is ragged, but I try to calm it. I can make out the darker line of the German trench ahead, maybe 40 yards away. Flares occasionally shoot up from their lines, and each time we freeze, one flare drifts uncomfortably near overhead, bathing us in a stark white glow. I press my face into the mud, heart in my throat, expecting at any moment the crack of gunfire, but nothing comes. The flare fizzles out. After an eternity, a soft pop behind us signals one of our flares going up, the signal to attack. "All right, lads, give 'em hell," Thompson snarls under his breath, and we surge up from the ground. A guttural shout tears from my own throat, a strange mix of terror and battle cry, as I follow James toward the enemy trench at a sprint. The last yards are a blur. A German voice yells alarm. Their flare light blossoms above, and now we must be fully visible, but momentum carries me forward. I leap over the remnants of their barbed wire. Someone ahead must have blown a gap or found a way through, and suddenly I'm at their trench edge. I see the shape of a German soldier rising in front of me, rifle in hand. He looks as startled as I feel. A young face under a coal scuttle helmet, eyes wide. For an instant, we hesitate. Two boys who should never have been pitted against each other. Then training and fear take over. He fumbles to bring his rifle up. I already have mine leveled. I yank the trigger. The recoil slams into my shoulder. At such close range, I cannot miss. The muzzle flash illuminates the interior of the trench for a split second, enough for me to see the bloom of red that bursts from the German's back as my bullet passes through him. He crumples with a horrible choking sound. I stumble forward, nearly slipping on the trench lip, and half fall into their front line. All around me is chaos, shouting in English and German. The explosions of our hand grenades going off farther down the line, with ear-shattering cracks. Muzzle flashes strobe the darkness. I hear a blood-curdling scream to my right, and catch a glimpse of two figures wrestling at the trench floor. One wears a British coat, it might be James, and the other a German field grey uniform. A bayonet glints. I can't tell who has the upper hand. A shadow looms to my left. I whirl to see another German rushing at me with a bayonet. I have no time to raise my rifle, so I meet him with my own bayonet lowered like a spear. We collide. There's a jolt that runs up my arms as the blade finds flesh. The German gasps, a wet, gurgling sound. His momentum knocks me back against the trench wall as my bayonet sinks into his stomach. He's on me now, face inches from mine. I will never forget his expression, shock, pain, and a desperate, almost pleading look. He's young, maybe my age or even younger. His rifle has fallen, but he grips my shoulders weakly as if to shake me off. My own hands are trapped between our bodies, still clutching the rifle that's impaled him. For a heartbeat, we are locked together. Eyes connected. I see his lips move in a reflexive whisper, maybe calling for his mother, or a final prayer. It's impossible to know. I feel a hot warmth spreading over my hands. His blood is pouring out, coating my fingers. I choke out something. "I'm sorry," not even sure if I speak it aloud. Then he slumps, weight collapsing onto me, nearly knocking me over. I wrench my rifle free, and the man slips to the ground with a feeble cry. curling in on himself. Everything after that is a haze. More German soldiers are appearing further down the trench, but our raid party is already withdrawing. We've been told never to linger more than a minute or two. Back, fall back, someone screams. I see James hauling another British soldier who's limping badly, a dark patch on his leg. Thompson lobs one last Mills bomb, grenade down the enemy trench with a curse, and turns to run. I scramble out of the trench, adrenaline masking the fatigue and fear for now. Bullets zip past us as the Germans recover from the shock and open fire. One zings by my ear with an angry whine, another smacks into the mud at my heels. We half crawl, half run back, the way we came. A series of loud blasts behind me signifies the grenades we threw, hopefully discouraging any immediate chase. By the time we reach our own wire, their machine guns have started tapping, sending bright tracers across the night. Thankfully, they sweep mostly overhead. We keep our heads low and dive back into the safety of our trench, tumbling in a heap of mud, breath, and pounding hearts. For a minute, none of us can speak. I lie in the trench bottom, gasping for air. My entire body is shaking uncontrollably, from exertion, from cold, from the aftershock of violence. James collapses beside me, and others drop in, one by one, all panting. Miraculously, it looks like most of us made it back. Thompson is last, helping the wounded man down. Our raid has cost a couple injuries, but no deaths on our side, at least none that returned. On the enemy side, I don't know how many we left dead or maimed in that brief spasm of slaughter. As the adrenaline ebbs, I become aware of the sticky wetness on my hands and uniform, the German soldier's blood. In the faint light, it looks black on my khaki tunic. My stomach lurches and I tear off my helmet, retching violently onto the duckboards. The contents of my meager dinner spill out mixed with bile. I wipe my mouth, hands still trembling. James places a steadying hand on my back. He's spattered with mud and possibly blood too, but in the darkness I can't tell. Neither of us speaks, but that touch is grounding. Corporal Thompson does a quick head count and gives a nod. We did well, boys, got one prisoner, and gave the Boche something to think about. Only then do I notice in the shadows a terrified-looking German soldier kneeling with his hands clasped behind his head, guarded by two of our men. He must have been grabbed in the melee. I never even saw it happen. The prisoner is trembling as much as I am. Intel will be happy, Thompson adds with a grim satisfaction. Then his tone softens as he looks at the state of us. All right, easy now. Medics will see to the wounded. The rest of you, get some rest if you can. Good work. Good work. The phrase echoes bitterly in my mind as Thompson moves off. Was any of this good? I can still feel the weight of the dying German against me, see his eyes in my mind. In the dim corner of the trench, I slump down next to James. Rain has started to fall steadily, masking the tears that finally come. I cover my face, the image of the young enemy soldier and the sound of his gurgling breath replaying in my head on an endless loop. I killed him. I killed someone. In the heat of the moment, I had no choice. I tell myself, but the knowledge offers little comfort. James silently passes me his flask, a small tin of rum that we get as a ration. I take it gratefully and gulp a burning mouthful. It doesn't wash the taste of bile and fear away completely, but it dulls the edges a little. We sit in silence for a long time in that wet, dark trench, shoulders touching, each alone with our thoughts. Around us, a few others light cigarettes or tend to the injured. The prisoner softly sobs in fear a few yards away. Eventually, James speaks in a low, strained voice. Edward, you all right? We studies and 10. I nod faintly, though I'm not all right. None of us are. You? I manage to ask. He hesitates, then says, I will be. It's what we need to believe. In the early hours before dawn, as I finally close my eyes in utter exhaustion, one thought troubles me. I expected to feel triumph after a successful raid, some sense of revenge for Andrews and the others we've lost. But all I feel is emptiness and a kind of sorrow that I can't articulate. Out in no man's land tonight, I traded a piece of my soul for survival, and I wonder how many more pieces of me this war will consume before it's done. James and I share a quiet moment the night before the assault. We sit in a support trench behind the front lines, cleaning our rifles methodically. The distant horizon flickers with constant flashes from our artillery, pounding the German lines. It's been doing so for 7 days and nights without pause. The sound is a continuous thunder, a drum fire that has become the very backdrop of existence. We've been moved forward under this barrage, ready to leap out once it lifts. By the time the summer of 1916 arrives, I've become a hardened trench soldier in some ways. It's been over a year since I first set foot in these forsaken ditches. I've seen comrades killed, and I've killed enemies with my own hands. Yet nothing could truly prepare us for what was coming on the Somme. Throughout June, we are aware that something big is brewing. The signs are impossible to miss. Endless columns of artillery guns rolling up to the front. Thousands of shells stacked in piles like monstrous beehives. New regiments arriving in camp, singing optimistic songs. Rumors swirl that the long-awaited big push is finally at hand. By late June, we are moved to a sector of the front along the River Somme in northern France. Officers brief us that a massive offensive will begin on July 1st. They tell us confidently that after an unprecedented week-long artillery bombardment, there won't be a German left alive within miles. Supposedly, the enemy front line will be nothing but churned dust and corpses, their barbed wire torn to pieces. Many of us dare to feel hopeful. After so much stalemate, maybe this attack will break the deadlock and end the war. Hell of a noise, isn't it? I remark, just to break the silence. My voice is strained, even shouting over the distant guns. I steal a glance at James. His face is thinner than when we enlisted, marked by grime and a thin scar on his chin from a piece of shrapnel last spring. In the intermittent gun flashes, I see him swallow nervously. He nods. The Bokshi must be cowering down there. How can anyone survive that? His attempt at confidence doesn't mask the quiver in his tone. James gives me a thin smile. We both want to believe it. In truth, an unease knots my stomach. I've learned to be wary of optimism here. Still, there's that flicker of hope. Perhaps this will be the attack that ends the war. Perhaps all this suffering will finally mean something. At 6:30 that morning, 0 hour -60, we stand ready in the assembly trenches. The bombardment is reaching a crescendo. It's like the sky is a giant drum, being pounded without mercy. Some men have cotton in their ears. Others, like me, just endure the concussive blasts. A signaller nearby mutters that over 1 million shells have been fired this week. I can well believe it. The earth trembles continuously. A few of the lads grin and make idle chatter, trying to mask their nerves. Others, pale and silent, finger trinkets or write last letters. I catch myself rubbing the small silver crucifix that my sister sent me, hidden under my tunic. I force a grin. I don't feel, if what the officers say is true, they won't. They'll be ghosts by morning, and we'll just stroll over and take their trenches. At 7:28, 2 minutes to go, the barrage that has been our shield suddenly lifts, moving deeper beyond the enemy front line. An uncanny hush falls over no man's land in front of us. After a week of hellish noise, this is our cue. We scramble up from the safety of the trenches and gather at the trench ladders and parapets. I find myself shoulder to shoulder with James and a young second lieutenant who's blowing his whistle too early in nervous excitement. I feel strangely detached, as if watching from outside my body. 07:30. A chorus of whistles pierces the air. "Over the top, boys! Up and at 'em!" shouts the lieutenant. Ladders are thrown up, and men begin to climb. Here we go. For a few steps as I advance at a quick walk, all remains quiet. Beside me, James is advancing too, eyes fixed forward, bayonet glinting at the end of his rifle. Dozens, hundreds of our boys are rising out of the trenches in waves, moving in neat lines across the pitted earth just as we practiced. I hear someone to my left shouting, "Hurrah!" as if on parade. The sheer number of soldiers emerging is awe-inspiring, a long line of khaki figures stepping through the smoke. I clamber up out of the trench and into the open, following the others. At that moment, a strange clarity descends on me. The morning light is a pale grey, and a mist clings to the shattered field ahead. Our artillery has churned the ground so much that it looks like the surface of the moon. Tree stumps, shell holes, and bits of barbed wire are silhouetted against the dawn. Far ahead, I can make out our objective, the German front line, a series of low muddy mounds and wire. We expect it to be silent and shattered. Then, about 20 seconds in, I hear the unmistakable staccato tat-tat-tat-tat of a German machine gun. Then another, and another, until the air is filled with the infernal metallic clattering. In an instant, the advance transforms into slaughter. The front of our line seems to just crumple. Men are tumbling to the ground left and right, some without a sound, others screaming as bullets tear into them. The reality hits me like a physical blow. The enemy is very much alive, and their guns are scything through us. Our confident march becomes a desperate run. Training evaporates. "Keep moving," someone hollered. We break into a sprint, but it's painfully slow going under our heavy packs and equipment. We had been ordered to move at walking pace, in orderly formation, a foolish tactic that now reveals itself in full insanity. We're like targets in a shooting gallery. I recall our drills about dashing and taking cover, but hardly anyone is doing that now. Most just press blindly forward as we were instructed in line. It's madness. I realize I've lost my helmet. Panicked, I pat around and find it bobbing in the muck, quickly jamming it back on my head. I peer over the lip of the crater. The sight is beyond anything I've seen. Our men are still coming on en masse behind me, walking straight into sheets of machine gun fire. They drop in waves, like rows of wheat scythed by an invisible vine. Those in front, my friends and fellow soldiers, lie in unnatural poses across no man's land, either dead or wounded. The din is overwhelming now. Machine guns, exploding shells, rifle fire, and the cries of injured men merge into a single cacophony. It truly is a dance of hell. Boom, rattle, crack, screams, all intermingled in a horrific symphony. About 50 yards out of our trench, a shell explodes to my right, throwing mud and body parts into the air. I'm knocked sideways by the blast shockwave and fall into a shell crater, half filled with rainwater and slime. Dazed for a second, I sputter and claw at the slick mud. Another man has fallen into the hole with me. He's missing most of his face and quite dead. I scramble away from him, my heart pounding so hard I think my chest will burst. I see James still on his feet, miraculously just a few yards ahead of my crater, crouched low and moving from one small dip in the ground to another. He turns and spots me. Against all sanity, he starts crawling back towards me. I shake my head and shout, "Go forward, don't wait for me." My voice is lost in the chaos. An instant later, a series of rippling bangs erupts nearby. Mortar shells. I duck as the earth erupts around us. When I look up again, I catch a glimpse of James collapsing into another shallow shell hole not far from me. My blood runs cold. I scramble out of my crater, adrenaline overriding fear, and rush to him, half crawling, half running as bullets whip past. I slide into James's crater and immediately see it's bad. A shard of shrapnel from the mortar has torn into his side just under the ribs. His hands are pressed to the wound, which is seeping blood at an alarming rate, staining the muddy water beneath us red. His face is chalk white, eyes wide with shock. "Eddie," he gasps, managing a faint smile as I grab his shoulder. "I'm here, James. Hang on, you'll be all right." I lie, trying to keep my voice steady. I fumble for the field dressing in my pouch. With trembling hands, I press the bandage to his side, trying to stanch the bleeding. He winces but strangely makes no sound. It's the quiet that scares me. Usually wounds like this come with screams, but he's eerily silent, fighting for each breath. Around us, the battle rages on, utterly indifferent to our personal crisis. Bullets crack overhead. A ricochet winds off a piece of metal nearby. I hunch over James, trying to make us small. My mind is racing. How to get him out? The German trench is still at least 100 yards off. Our own trench is behind us, maybe 50 yards. Both distances feel like miles under fire. "Listen," I shout into his ear. "We have to get back, or they'll kill us here." "Leave me," James whispers, startling me. Go on." He nods weakly, blood flecking his lips. Together we manage to half crawl, half drag ourselves to the edge of the crater. But when James tries to push himself up, he collapses with a cry, clutching his side. The exertion is too much. I can't, Ed." His voice is barely audible. My heart wrenches. "You can. Come on, lean on me." I loop his arm over my shoulders and start heaving him up. We stagger a few steps, but he's lost too much blood. We tumble back down into the crater. Both gasp. He looks at me, and for a brief moment there's a clarity in his gaze. Tell my mum. He chokes on the words, a spasm of pain, cutting them off. I nod frantically, holding back sobs. No, James, stay with me, I plead. His eyes flutter. I press my hand hard on his wound, but the blood keeps welling around my fingers. In the chaos around us, I can do nothing but bear witness. His breathing becomes a series of shallow gasps. I lean close, my muddy helmet touching his. I shake my head fiercely, tears building in my eyes. Not a chance. Come on, one more try, mate. I try again to lift him, but at that moment a fresh barrage of machine gun fire rakes across our path. I'm forced to duck, nearly dropping him. James coughs, a wet, horrible sound. His head slumps against my arm. You'll tell her yourself, I say, another lie, a ghost of a smile. He grins quickly, as if to thank me. Then he shudders and goes very still, eyes unfocused, staring at something far beyond me. James is dead, my closest friend in this damned war, the boy with whom I shared laughter and fears, is gone in my arms. There's no time for grief, only a howling emptiness fills me, quickly eclipsed by a cold, trembling fury and despair. I gently lay him down in the crater. My hands are sticky with his blood. A part of me wants to curl up beside him and wait for a bullet to take me too. But something else, survival instinct perhaps, propels me to move, teeth gritted, fighting back tears and rage. I grab my rifle and peer out of the crater. The attack is still going, though God knows how anyone is alive out here. Small knots of men from later waves are scattered across the field, taking cover where they can, pinned by the merciless German fire. Many of our bodies already litter the ground in front of our own trench. I don't know how long I cower there. It feels like hours. My world shrinks to the muddy hole and the hellish storm of steel above it. A few other survivors are hunkered in craters nearby. I see a cluster of 3 men in one to my right, one of them screaming for his mother as blood spurts from his leg. Elsewhere, wounded men are crying out or lying deathly still. Between our crater and the German lines ahead, I notice something horrifying. The barbed wire in front of the enemy trench is largely intact. A dark, snarled fence untouched by our shelling. All those shells, and the wire still stands. Some of our troops reached that far and became caught in it. I see bodies hanging on the wires, grotesquely twisted, like ragdolls snagged on thorns. It's clear now why so few made it through. The paths were blocked, and the German guns had perfect targets. I know we cannot advance. The only hope is to fall back and survive. But retreat in daylight, under fire, is suicide too. The only chance is to stay low and wait for night or some distraction. So I remain huddled in the crater with James's body, blood pounding in my ears, adrenaline and anguish coursing through me. Not far to my left, I see a bizarre sight amid the carnage. A lone hare, wild-eyed and panicked, is bounding across no man's land, zigzagging through shell holes. For an absurd second, I focus on the creature, its desperate dash an echo of our own. Somehow that jolts me from my shock. I am not ready to die here, not like this, not for nothing. Eventually, as the sun climbs high and bakes the battlefield, the gunfire begins to taper off. Perhaps the commanders finally called off the assault in the face of such slaughter, or maybe the Germans simply ceased fire because there was almost no one left standing to shoot. By afternoon, an eerie silence falls over the field, broken only by the moans of the dying. The heat and stench become oppressive. Flies gather in black swarms on the carnage. I remain in a stupor, clutching my rifle, unwilling to move from the tenuous safety of my crater. Shock has muted all my emotions. I feel neither fear nor sorrow, just a leaden numbness. As dusk mercifully arrives, turning the sky bruised purple, I know I must attempt to go back. Crawling out, I stagger through the maze of shell holes toward our original front line, now only sparsely manned by reserve troops who came up later. The scene I pass through is something out of a nightmare. I step over piles of bodies in British khaki, sometimes layered 2 or 3 deep. Limbs and pieces of men I shared breakfast with, just hours ago, are strewn about as if a giant child ripped apart its dolls in a tantrum. The wounded still call for help, faintly. A few I try to assist. I half drag a man with a shattered knee for several yards, until stretcher bearers appear from the trench to take him. My strength is nearly spent, every muscle aches, and my ears ring. At last, I tumble back into what remains of our front trench, which is now an aid post and a point of desperate head count. Someone pulls me in, and I collapse against the parapet, breathing in gulps. I'm immediately accosted by a sergeant with wild eyes, who grabs me. "Were you in the second wave? Did anyone else make it? Where's Lieutenant Foster?" I can only shake my head, unable to speak. Around us, a few other mud-caked survivors are also slumping down, faces blank with shock. I see one man weeping openly, crying out a name over and over, perhaps a friend lost out there. I find James right where he fell. My throat tightens, seeing him in the pale light, lying on his back in a pool of dried blood. The bandage I pressed to his side is still there, soaked through. His eyes are thankfully closed now. Gently, I kneel and unfasten the identity disc from around his neck, along with a letter I find in his pocket, addressed to his mother, likely never finished. My hands shake, but I stow these items carefully. "I'll make sure she gets them," I whisper, my voice trembling. My tears finally come, sliding silently down my face in the darkness. I want to carry him back, but a corporal quietly tugs my arm. "We cannot take the bodies now. There are too many, and our risk of drawing fire grows the longer we linger." With a heavy reluctance, I leave my dearest friend lying there among hundreds of others. No one has time to console anyone here. Each of us finds a corner to slump in, the living among the dead. Eventually, as night deepens, a few of us volunteer to climb out again, under the cover of darkness and relative ceasefire, to retrieve any wounded we can, and perhaps bring back identification discs from the dead. I force myself to join them. I cannot leave James out there without at least taking something of his back. Under a moonless sky, with shells still bursting in the far distance, we retrace our steps across parts of that blood-soaked field. We move like ghosts, quiet and heartsick, stepping around bloated forms and slick pools that gleam black. The sergeant curses under his breath and moves on to ask someone else. I dimly register a medical officer stepping over bodies, directing orderlies to line up the wounded along the trench. The terrible groans and sobs of those being treated or dying fill the air. I search those faces, half hoping James might be among the wounded by some miracle, but I know he isn't. He lies out there in the muck, where I left him. In the days that follow, our battered unit is pulled from the line to regroup. I move through it all in a stupor. The surviving officers commend those of us who went out to fetch the wounded, calling us brave. I feel no pride in it. How can any of us feel anything but anger and grief? We started that morning full of hope and dutiful obedience. By nightfall, hope was dead, buried beneath the mud with so many good men. We return to our lines weighed down with despair. Dawn finds me sitting listlessly at the bottom of a trench, my uniform stiff with dried blood and mud. Word filters along that the first day of this grand offensive was a catastrophe. Thousands upon thousands of our men are dead or wounded, for virtually no gain. Our attack failed on almost every sector. Hearing this should shock me, but I feel nothing. The scale of it is beyond comprehension. All I can see in my mind is James's face as he died, and the endless rows of fallen comrades. One thought keeps repeating in my head. They told us the enemy would be gone, that we'd just walk over them. They were wrong, terribly wrong. The plan was hopeless. The promises hollow. We walked straight into a death trap. As I lie on a stretcher waiting for a turn to be looked over by a doctor for minor shrapnel cuts and sheer exhaustion, I reach into my pocket and touch James's ID tag and letter. My fingers curl around them, and I squeeze until the metal edges bite into my skin. I made him a promise, and I will keep it if I survive this war. But right now, in this moment, it feels like a part of me also died out there on the Somme. The part that believed in the glory of war is gone forever. Now I know only the grim reality. War is nothing but the systematic destruction of hope and life. a juggernaut that spares no one in its path. I close my eyes, tears leaking from the corners, and let exhaustion finally overtake me. In my restless sleep, the dance of hell continues in my nightmares, a ceaseless echo of gunfire and the faces of the dead, marching with me, never to leave my side. In the aftermath of the Somme, what's left of my battalion is withdrawn from the line. I'm granted a short home leave at the end of 1916, a bittersweet respite from the front. Returning to England feels like stepping onto a different planet. The quiet of the countryside unsettles me. At night I wake, in a cold sweat, imagining the thump of artillery in the distance. People in my village greet me as a hero, but I can hardly meet their eyes. They ask polite, clueless questions. What's it like over there, or did you get the Germans? I offer stiff, empty answers, knowing nothing I say can make them understand. How could I possibly convey the truth of the trenches without breaking down? I fulfill a solemn promise during that leave. With dread pooling in my stomach, I visit James's family in a neighboring town. His mother opens the door, and upon seeing me in uniform alone, her face crumples with grief that needs no words. I deliver to her the items I carried back, James's identity disc, and the unfinished letter to her that I'd retrieved. We sit at her kitchen table, and I struggle through the hardest conversation of my life, recounting his final moments as gently as I can. I tell her that he was brave, and that he wasn't in pain at the end, another necessary lie, perhaps. She listens, clutching her son's letter to her chest, tears streaming silently down her cheeks. When I finally fall silent, she thanks me in a trembling voice and says she is proud of her boy. I break then, tears I had bottled up for months, finally spill free as this grieving mother embraces me. In her arms, I feel both the weight of our shared loss and the unbearable guilt that I lived while James did not. The rest of my leave passes in a blur of haunting memories and hollow attempts at normalcy. All too soon, I'm back in uniform on a troop train, heading to the front again. By the spring of 1917, I find myself in Flanders, in the notorious Ypres sector of Belgium. The war grinds on, and so do we. I've been promoted to Lance Corporal, more a reflection of attrition than ambition. So many NCOs have been killed or wounded that even us haunted-eyed Somme veterans are pressed into leading fresh men. In April, we take part in the Battle of Arras, further south, a bloody offensive where we actually gain some ground at terrible cost. I lose 2 of the new lads under my charge in a single day to a machine gun nest, and another to a shell that buried him alive. By now I perform the motions almost automatically, urging men forward, hitting the dirt when fire intensifies, writing letters to next of kin after each action. The sharp pain of loss has dulled to a constant ache. A part of me fears I'm becoming cold, but it's the only way to keep functioning. As summer 1917 deepens, my unit moves back north to Brest for yet another big push. They call this one the Third Battle of Brest, but we refer to it bitterly as Passchendaele, after a village that will soon be synonymous with misery. The offensive begins in late July. Unlike the summer's dry dust, here we contend with relentless rain that turns the battlefield into a quagmire. Shelling has destroyed the Flanders drainage ditches, and the terrain becomes an endless swamp of mud. We advance through a shattered landscape that scarcely resembles Earth. The shell craters are so numerous and filled with water that the ground looks like a pockmarked sponge. Pulverized tree stumps, heaps of barbed wire, and bits of uniforms poke out of sucking mud that ranges from knee-deep to waist-deep. Progress is agonizingly slow. Every step threatens to pull off a boot or send a man toppling into a flooded hole. Early in the battle, I witness a heart-wrenching scene that will plague my nightmares. A small group of our soldiers gets lost in the darkness and strays into a patch of seemingly solid ground that is actually a deep bog churned by hellfire. Suddenly cries ring out. One by one, the men start sinking. We rush to help, but the mud is like wet concrete around their legs. 2 of them go under, before our eyes, the mire swallowing them with ghastly slurping sounds. One moment they were flailing, and the next, there's only filthy water where they stood. Help! For God's sake! Another screams, stuck up to his chest. Desperate, we form a human chain on firmer ground, and extend rifles and branches. I grab the hand of one drowning soldier, and pull with all my might. His hand slips from mine, slick with mud, and he goes under with a gurgling cry. Only one man from that group is dragged out alive, vomiting mud and trembling uncontrollably. The others vanish without a trace, entombed in the Flanders muck. I find myself shaking in anger and horror. Dying to bullets or shells is terrible enough. To be consumed by the earth itself seems too cruel for words. Days and nights blur together in a slog of rain, mud, and unending shellfire. Sleep is snatched in an oversaturated dugout that drips water constantly. The rats here are bold and starving. They plague our supply dumps and chew at any wounded unable to move. Lice still infest every seam of my clothing, adding incessant itching to our torment. It's as if the very environment is an enemy. By now, I have a couple of close comrades left. Corporal Davies, a gruff Welsh miner who joined us earlier in the year, and Private O'Connor, a young Irish lad who replaced one of my lost men. We form a small support for each other in this hellscape. One evening, as we huddle under a torn tarpaulin to avoid the lashing rain, O'Connor attempts a smile and says, "At least we've got plenty of water, eh?" We all break into laughter, the kind born from despair rather than humor. In truth, clean water is scarce. Most of what we have is tainted with mud. Our rations too are soaked and unappetizing. Somehow joking about it helps a little. August arrives, and the offensive grinds on. We gain ground by yards, only to lose it to counterattacks. Then take it again. The casualty lists mount for negligible progress. Through it all, the mud is our constant adversary. We hear of men who simply disappeared in shell holes, never to be seen again. He who had a corpse to stand on was lucky, a sergeant quips darkly one morning as we haul ourselves out of another flooded trench. Grimly, I realize he's right. At times, the only solid ground in this morass are the bodies of fallen soldiers. I've stepped on more than one without realizing it, until I felt the give of rotten flesh beneath my boot. Indeed, I will never forget wading through a particularly deep crater where the water reached my hips, my foot pressed down on something that shifted, and a decomposing face briefly bobbed up in front of me with empty eyes. I recoiled in revulsion, nearly toppling over. After that, I forced myself not to look too closely at what lies beneath the surface. Death is literally underfoot at Poshendale. The constant shelling makes rescue of the wounded extremely perilous. One night, I hear pitiful cries coming from no man's land. A British soldier, grievously injured and stuck in mud, calling out for help again and again. The sound goes on for hours, growing weaker, until it stops at last, with a final lonely wail. We are helpless to save him. Any attempt would have been suicide under the enemy's guns. Such incidents carve scars into the soul. I feel numb most of the time, but in the quiet moments, an immense sorrow threatens to crush me. Despite everything, we still occasionally receive orders for attacks. In September, our platoon is to assault a slight rise nicknamed Hill 35, really just a low slope of shattered earth and slime. By now I'm leading a section of newer men. Before we go over, I check on each of them. O'Connor is shaking like a leaf, whispering a prayer. I squeeze his shoulder and offer what encouragement I can. Davies lights a cigarette and grinds it out, face grimy and set. At 0 hour, we clamber out and slog forward. The rain has momentarily ceased, but a heavy mist limits visibility. We spread out as best as we can over the sucking ground. Immediately, German flares shoot up, casting harsh light on our figures. Machine guns chatter from concealed concrete bunkers the enemy has built. Their pillboxes are a new horror, small forts that survived our bombardments. Bullets rip through our ranks. I shove one of my men down just as a burst sails overhead. He lives, another behind him drops. We continue on, adrenaline pushing us through knee-deep mud. As we close in, the Germans start firing mustard gas shells among us. With a series of soft thumps, canisters explode, releasing an oily yellow-brown mist that clings low to the ground. Gas! Gas! I shout hoarsely, yanking my gas mask from its pouch. The drills are second nature now. Mask on, helmet back over it, adjust the hood. I fumble mine on successfully, and then help O'Connor, whose hands are slippery with mud and panic. We get it over his face just in time as the sweet garlic-like odor of mustard gas hits. Through the mask's foggy goggles, the world looks surreal. ghostly figures moving in eerie silence. The mask muffles sound as shells burst and mud sprays. One man nearby wasn't quick enough. He claws at his throat, gasping. Within minutes, he's on his knees, coughing up bloody foam, his lungs seared by the toxic vapor. Mustard gas is not as immediately deadly as chlorine or fustian. It's meant to maim, but in these quantities it can kill. I force myself to keep moving, stepping past the writhing victim, my heart pounding. We reach the enemy pillbox, somehow. A grenade from Davies clears the machine gun within, and we storm the structure. I find myself face to face with a German soldier in the doorway. He's frantically donning his own gas mask. I shoot him point blank, and he crumples. The interior is a mess of smoke, blood, and concrete. For a brief moment, the position is ours. Our triumph is short-lived. A counter-barrage of mortar bombs begins to pepper the area, and the Germans from a neighboring bunker turn their guns on us. We hold until a jagged chunk of shrapnel hits Davies, tearing open his back. He collapses with a howl. I and another fellow drag him out of the pillbox and back into the cratered field. Under the cover of the lingering gas haze and growing darkness, the miserable fight for Hill 35 lasted all day. I order a withdrawal. We carry Davies with us, each step an eternity in the mud. O'Connor helps me, tears in his eyes as our friend groans in agony with each jolt. We make it back to our lines, but Davies is deathly pale. Medics whisk him away, and I hear he might not last the night. Exhausted beyond words, O'Connor and I slump in what shelter we can find. My gas mask lenses are cracked, and I finally peel the apparatus off, coughing and wiping at burning eyes. Some mustard gas must have seeped in. Angry red blisters are already forming on my wrists and neck, where my skin was exposed. O'Connor's coughing too, but we're alive. For now. As I sit there in the trench shivering, I try to muster some feeling, relief at surviving, sorrow for Davies. Anything, but I am spent. I feel hollowed out. Around me, the rain starts again, pattering on the duckboards and helmet tops. A foul smell of gas, decay, and mud hangs in the air. O'Connor, eyes rimmed with red from either gas or tears, likely both, suddenly asks me in a cracking voice, "Corporal, will this ever end?" I have no answer. I can only pat his back and murmur, "It has to, someday." But inside, I wonder if we'll last to see it. That autumn, as the battle drags into October, the mud somehow grows even worse. The entire battlefield is described by one reporter as a wasteland of mud, blood, and ruin. And he's not wrong. We fight for weeks to gain a few miserable 100 yards up to the ruins of Passchendaele village. In early November, the offensive finally grinds to a halt. The skeletal remains of the village are in Allied hands at last, and the generals call that a victory. I suppose in strategic terms it is, but looking at the sea of corpses half buried in mud between Ypres and Passchendaele, it's hard to feel victorious. We've paid with rivers of blood for each splintered tree and each flooded trench. When we are finally relieved and pulled back from the front in late November 1917, I am scarcely the same person who arrived here months ago. I've become a mud-caked phantom, trudging numbly behind the lines with vacant eyes. In the lulls of battle, I sometimes caught myself humming a lullaby my mother used to sing, a desperate attempt by my mind to find solace. My nights are plagued with nightmares of drowning men and ghostly figures emerging from the mire to drag me down. I wake up stifling screams, my heart hammering, the terror as real as when I lived it. Yet I carry on, because that's all I can do. The war is not over, and as 1917 turns toward 1918, whispers reach us, but the enemy is not beaten yet. Even after all this bloodshed, worse may yet come. I push that thought away as I try to recover some strength in a camp behind the lines. I have nothing left to give, I think, but the war, indifferent to my exhaustion, will demand more all the same. The new year 1918 comes with a bleak winter, but also a strange sense of quiet on the Western Front. Rumors abound. The Germans might be planning something big, especially now that Russia has bowed out of the war, freeing up enemy divisions. Our high command seems cautiously optimistic that even if the Germans attack, they can't sustain it for long. We, the exhausted frontline soldiers, are less sanguine. We've seen the enemy's tenacity and have learned never to underestimate them. By March, I'm stationed with my unit, rebuilt, with fresh drafts after Passchendaele, in a relatively quiet sector of the front near Saint-Quentin, back along the old Somme battleground. The irony isn't lost on me. We're defending ground we once bled to capture. The trench systems here are shallower and less developed than the ones we held for years in Flanders. In fact, during the winter the British Army slightly withdrew to a prepared defensive line called the Grandcourt Line, hoping a shorter front would be easier to hold. I'm not convinced. Our defences still seem thinly manned. Dawn on 21 March 1918 begins like no other. In the eerie pre-dawn darkness around 4:40 a.m., the world suddenly erupts. An enormous German bombardment crashes down on us, a barrage more intense than anything I endured even at the Somme. Thousands of guns open up in unison, and the night turns to violent day. Shells scream and burst all along our lines. In seconds, our dugout timbers are shaking and clods of dirt raining from above. I jolt awake to the piercing shrill of alarm whistles, and someone yelling, "Stand to! Gas!" I fumble for my gas mask as the unmistakable odor of gas, a biting chemical reek, wafts in. The Germans are using a terrible mix of high explosive and gas shells, trying to knock out our communications and defenses in one blow. I jam the mask on just before a wave of poison gas, likely chlorine or phosgene, sweeps through the trench, rolling low to the ground like pale green fog. I can hear men coughing and shouting in the din. The sound of shells is unending, a continuous thunder that seems to tear the sky apart. Trench mortars, field guns, heavy long-range guns, they're all in play. Our own artillery, caught by surprise, responds only fitfully. Blind and half-deafened, I huddle against the trench wall with O'Connor, still with me, now a battle-hardened lad of 19. Through my fogged mask lenses, I see flashes of explosions silhouette him as he crosses himself in silent prayer. My heart is a cold lump of fear. This barrage is a prelude to an attack, a massive one. We've known they were coming, but the ferocity still shocks me. After about 5 hours of living hell, the bombardment lifts suddenly around 9 a.m. In the ringing silence that follows, whistles blow on the German side. I yank off my gas mask to conserve my filtered air and gulp the tainted air. The gas is dissipating now. My lungs burn and eyes water. But there's no time to recover. Out of the lingering smoke, German stormtroopers emerge. These aren't the slow-moving waves of earlier in the war. They come at a run, in small groups, moving from cover to cover with deadly efficiency. I catch glimpses of them, clad in grey-green, some wearing terrifying-looking gas masks with snouts, others with light equipment for speed. They wield grenades, light machine guns, and flamethrowers. Our trench line erupts in frantic rifle and machine gun fire as we open up on the attackers. I climb up to the fire step and fire my Lewis gun, a light machine gun one of our sections has at the figures darting through the haze. I see a few fall, but many more are behind. Within minutes, enemy troops are upon our wire, which, due to their bombardment, is practically obliterated, and then they are in our trenches. "O'Connor, fall back!" I shout as a stormtrooper drops into our trench just down the line, blasting a trench bay with his Bergmann submachine gun, a rapid-firing weapon I've never seen before. The bullets rip through 2 of our men before they even realize what hit them. We return fire. The assailant falls, but more grenades tumble into our trench with a clank. One explodes behind me, and I feel a hot pain as shrapnel slices my thigh. I stumble, but adrenaline keeps me moving. Chaos reigns. Our defensive line is ruptured in multiple places. A runner comes sprinting down the communication trench, yelling, "Retreat, fall back to the reserve line. They've broken through." I help O'Connor up from where he was firing his rifle and half-drag him as we join the flood of British soldiers, scrambling rearward. It's not an organized withdrawal, it's a rout. We leap over bodies of friends and foe, scramble around shattered trench parapets. At one point, I stumble through what was our battalion command post. The officers inside are all dead or wounded, the maps shredded and blowing in the wind. Gas still lingers in low spots, making men cough as they run. As we fall back, I witness scenes that sear themselves into my memory. A group of dazed British gunners stand by their field artillery pieces, which they haven't managed to move in time. Their horses lie dead from shell fire. They desperately try to load and fire one last round, but a squad of German soldiers overruns them. A bitter thought hits me. Guns we dragged inch by inch across this land are now lost in mere minutes to the enemy. Here and there, pockets of brave resistance fight delaying actions. I see a Lewis gun team set up behind some sandbags, mowing down advancing Germans until a flamethrower's stream of liquid fire engulfs them. Their screams as they burn alive are something I cannot shut out. On another flank, a lone British officer stands atop the trench, revolver in hand, shouting for us to hold the line. He's cut down by a burst of machine gun fire, crumpling like a rag doll. O'Connor and I managed to reach a shallow reserve trench a few hundred yards back, where remnants of our company are trying to reform. My thigh is bleeding, but I can still stand. An officer I barely know, a lieutenant from another unit, yells at us to prepare to counterattack. Maybe a dozen of us gather, fixing bayonets almost out of habit, but our hasty attempt to stem the tide is futile. The Germans, buoyed by momentum, outnumber us and outflank our position within the hour. We hear the sputter of German Maxim guns and realize they've set up on our flanks. The lieutenant shouts, "Fall back again. Go, go. There is no shame now, only survival." We sprint across open ground, bullets kicking up dirt around us. O'Connor cries out and tumbles forward. A bullet has caught him in the back. I skid to a halt and grab him under the arms. He's coughing blood, legs dragging limply as I try to pull him along. "Leave me," he gasps, echoing James's words from so long ago. But I refuse, half carrying, half pulling him despite my own throbbing leg wound. We reach a sunken road that is serving as yet another fallback point. A few tanks, the lumbering new Mark V models, are trundling up to form a rear guard. British and Australian troops frantically dig in along this road. I collapse behind a tank with O'Connor. Medics tear open his tunic, and I catch a glimpse of the wound. It's mortal. The bullet passed through his lungs. His breath comes in wet gurgles. He grips my hand with surprising strength, eyes wide with fear and pain. "You'll be okay," I lie to him, cradling his head. "They'll patch you up, send you to Blighty." He tries to speak, but only blood flecks his lips. I lean closer, hearing him whisper, "I don't want to die." My throat tightens. "You're not going to die. Do you hear me? Stay with me, Liam." It's the first time I've used his first name, but I think he knows, and I know too. His grip slackens, and a few moments later, after a last shuddering sigh, O'Connor goes still. I wipe a tear from my dirt-streaked face, barely registering that my cheeks are wet from more than rain. I have now lost nearly everyone I ever called friend in this war. How many more names will I add to that list before it ends? The sound of German artillery bringing ranging shots closer shakes me from despair. I gently close O'Connor's eyes and pick up my rifle. The tank next to me opens up with its 6-pounder gun, firing over our heads at an unseen target. A staff officer runs by shouting, "Hold this line. The French are coming to our aid. Hold." It's a desperate time. For days, this chaos continues. It's the Great Retreat, later dubbed the March Retreat, and it feels like the end of the world. We fall back, kilometer after kilometer, over shell-torn ground that we had fought so hard to gain in years prior. Villages behind our lines, where we'd once rested, now become battlefields themselves. I see columns of refugees, Belgian and French civilians carrying what they can, fleeing westward from their suddenly liberated then re-invaded towns. The sight of women, children and the elderly trudging through the mud as shells burst behind them is heartbreaking and infuriating. For 2 weeks, I barely sleep. I march, dig, fight, and retreat in an endless cycle. My uniform is in rags, my body on the verge of collapse. The whole British Fifth Army, they say, is shattered. But amidst the collapse, there are slivers of hope. Reinforcements arrive, including fresh American units, and reserves rushed from quieter sectors. The German advance, stretched thin and encountering logistical problems, begins to slow by early April. They've advanced impressively, but not achieved a decisive victory. On April 4th, near the town of Villers-Bretonneux, I find myself in a scratch unit of British, Australian and Canadian troops, hastily assembled for a counterattack. We dig in on a ridge, overlooking the town. The Germans come on again in force, but this time we're prepared and in greater numbers. With gritted teeth, we hold our line. The fighting is savage. The fields are littered with bodies and burning tanks, both theirs and ours. But after a grueling day, we halt the enemy. They fail to take Amiens, the city they desperately needed for a breakthrough. By mid-April, the great German spring offensive sputters to a halt. They gained ground, yes, a huge bulge in the front, but they did not win the war, and their losses were enormous. I hear captured German prisoners mutter that they call this push the Kaiserschlacht, Kaiser's battle, and their last card. I pray that's true, for we are nearly spent ourselves. I am now one of the few original members of my battalion, left standing. So many familiar faces are gone forever, buried hastily, or left behind in the frantic retreat. In the lull that follows, I finally have time to process the trauma of the past weeks. One balmy April evening, as I sit against the remnants of a stone wall, writing in my journal, I suddenly realize I am utterly alone. Not in the physical sense, there are troops all around, but alone in that none of the men I started this journey with are beside me anymore. James, Andrews, Davies, O'Connor, all gone. New comrades have come, and some have gone just as fast. I feel like a ghost, a lone survivor carrying the memories of the fallen. However, something else stirs in me, alongside the grief, a flicker of determination I thought long extinguished. We held. By God, against all odds, we held. And word is that the Germans shot their bolt. They're exhausted now, running low on reserves and supplies. Meanwhile, more American soldiers flood into France each day, tipping the balance. Perhaps for the first time, I dare to think, we might actually live to see victory, to see the end of this nightmare. We get little rest. The German offensives don't fully stop. They lash out again on other parts of the front. In April at Lice against our Portuguese allies, for instance, causing another crisis. But gradually we turn the tide. By the summer of 1918, the momentum has shifted. At last, after enduring years of punishing defense, it is our turn to advance. And I will be there, carrying the weight of ghosts beside me, to help deliver the final blow. The summer of 1918 finds the Allied armies rejuvenated and on the offensive at last. After stopping the German spring assaults, we receive better equipment, improved rations, and an influx of enthusiastic American troops joining our ranks. It's a strange sight to see these fresh-faced Yanks in their clean uniforms, full of confidence and unscarred by years of mud and blood. Standing beside them, I feel decades older than my actual age of 22, but their energy is infectious and bolsters our morale. We know the enemy is on the back foot now. Whispers run through the trenches that the Germans are exhausted, low on supplies, their people starving under the Allied blockade. Many of us dare to hope that the end might finally be in sight. On August 8, 1918, we launch a massive offensive near Amiens. I will never forget that dawn. Instead of us cowering under bombardment, it is our artillery that unleashes hell. A perfectly coordinated surprise barrage that catches the enemy off guard. As the thunder of our guns peaks, hundreds of tanks, yes, hundreds, emerge from the morning mist, lumbering steel beasts, leading our advance. I'm assigned as infantry support behind one of the Mark V tanks named Invictus, its name painted boldly on the hull. As the tank crushes through the barbed wire and rumbles towards the enemy lines, we follow in its wake, hearts pounding with an emotion unfamiliar in a long time. Confident. The German front line at Amiens collapses with startling speed. Many of their soldiers, demoralized and taken aback by the ferocity of our assault, throw down their rifles and surrender en masse. We push forward miles beyond our starting positions, a feat unheard of since trench warfare began. The landscape we move through is scarred, yes, but gradually, we pass out of the old battlefields into areas of France that had been under German occupation for years and thus spared the worst devastation. Trees still stand, villages still have roofs, civilians, long living under enemy rule, emerge from cellars and cheer us with tearful gratitude. When our column enters a small liberated town, An elderly French woman in black shawls reaches out and grabs my hand, pressing it to her lips in thanks. I don't know what to say. I haven't felt like a hero in a very long time, yet to her and others, we are deliverers. I manage a smile and tip my helmet. Inside I feel a warm spark, a sense that perhaps all our sacrifices might mean something after all. We do not let up. This is the 100 Days Offensive, though of course we didn't call it that at the time. To us it's simply a relentless series of attacks driving the enemy eastward day by day. I participate in Battle of Albert, the breaking of the Hindenburg Line, and numerous lesser-known fights across northern France. Each battle costs lives, but the enemy is visibly faltering. The trenches are less elaborate now, their artillery fire sparser. We capture soldiers who are mere boys of 16 or men well into their 40s. Signs that their manpower is running thin. Many of the prisoners look relieved to be out of the fight, fed up with a war they know is lost. Still, desperation can breed vicious resistance. In late September, during the assault on the formidable Hindenburg Line, the last major German defensive position, we face some of the toughest fighting of the war. The Germans, knowing this line is their last hope, fight like cornered beasts. Casualties on both sides are horrific. But we have learned much since 1916. Our tactics are smarter now. Our cooperation between tanks, infantry, artillery, and the newly powerful Royal Air Force is vastly improved. Under a storm of shells and aerial strafing, we punch through the Hindenburg Line near St. Quentin. Once that bulwark falls, the road to victory lies open. Early October finds us advancing rapidly through the shattered remnants of what was once the German front. The war becomes one of movement, open fields and swift marches instead of inch-by-inch trench gains. One crisp morning, I crest a hill alongside my comrades and behold the Belgian frontier in the distance. The air smells different here, less of cordite and decay, more of autumn leaves. We liberate the Belgian town of Mons in early November, completing a bittersweet circle. It was near Mons that the British fought in 1914 at the war's outset. The German army is now in full retreat everywhere. Their spirit broke. We hear tales of uprisings in Germany, the Kaiser's government teetering. As the days creep into November 1918, rumors swirl that an armistice is imminent. Few of us dare to believe it, but on the morning of November 11th, 1918, the word comes down. A ceasefire has been agreed, effective at 11 o'clock. The war will end on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month. The news leaves me reeling. We are still at the front, having just pushed beyond Mons. Fighting is actually ongoing as the message arrives. Sporadic skirmishes echo up to the final moments. Incredibly, some officers order one last push to reclaim a bit more ground before 11 Siren. It feels absurd and cruel. Men are still dying even with peace, literally minutes away. Dutiful to the end, we follow orders and advance cautiously into a thinning hail of enemy fire. At 10:50 I duck into a shell crater with a few others as a final exchange of rifle shots zings by. I glance at my pocket watch, a dented thing I picked up off a German soldier who no longer needed it. 5 minutes to 11. The time ticks by with agonizing slowness. I hold my breath. Will it really stop? Or is this some elaborate trick? My heart pounds in my ears. Then, at long last, 11 Larand arrives. A strange calm descends. One by one, the guns fall silent, as if an invisible conductor has cut off the orchestra in the middle of a violent movement. The sudden cessation of artillery and gunfire is unreal. After years of nearly constant thunder, the quiet is almost more frightening. A vast, soundless void, where the familiar din used to be. I lift my head above the crater's rim. Across the way, I see German soldiers standing up on their parapets, not firing, just standing. One of them, a lanky fellow with dirt-covered face, raises his hand in a small wave, as if to say he's done. Unsure what to do, I raise mine in return. Cease fire! Cease fire! The shouts echo down our lines. Slowly, hesitantly, we climb out of cover. Is it truly over? It must be. No bullets come our way. Men around me start to cheer uncertainly. Then with growing fervor, some laugh, others cry openly. A stocky private from London pops open a bottle of rum. He's saved, and whoops, we've made it, lads. but his joyous outburst only highlights my own muted state. I stand there, in the chilly November air, rifle in hand, utterly drained. All around, comrades are shaking hands, slapping backs, embracing like brothers. I force a smile when a friend claps me on the shoulder, but inside I am numb. I scan the scene as British and German soldiers now watch each other from a distance, in eerie quiet. There's no fraternization, too much has happened for that, but there is a palpable mutual relief. Like two boxers who've beaten each other senseless and finally hear the bell, we slump in our corners, spent. That evening, I find a moment to myself at the edge of a captured field. The sun sets in brilliant hues of orange and purple, a peaceful sky that belies the devastation below. I sit on an overturned ammunition crate and pull out a small notebook, my journal. By lantern light, I scribble a few halting lines. November 11, 1918. The war is over. Hard to believe. I am alive. I am alive, when so many are not. James O'Connor, and the others, I carry them with me. What now? My pen trembles, and I cannot find further words. What now, indeed? I had clung to one goal for so long, survive the war. Now that goal is reached, but I feel no triumph, only a profound emptiness and uncertainty. Who am I, if not a soldier in this war? How do I return to normal life carrying the weight of everything I've seen and done? I look at my hands in the lantern glow, hands that have killed and saved, hands that held dying friends, hands now shaking with the enormity of what peace might mean. Distant booms continue sporadically through the night, not warfare, but celebratory fireworks and shell flares as troops and liberated civilians rejoice. I can even hear faint music and singing from the town, yet I remain apart in darkness, unable to join in fully. Eventually, I stand and walk back to our encampment. Along the way, I pass rows of freshly dug graves marked by makeshift wooden crosses. One of them bears O'Connor's name, another is simply marked Unknown British Soldier. I stop and bow my head, a silent benediction for the fallen. You have peace now, I think to them, and we the living must somehow learn to carry on. A cool wind picks up, rustling through the broken trees. I wrap my coat tighter, feeling the chill. In a pocket, I still carry James's dog tag, and now O'Connor's too, relics of my fallen brothers. I clutch them in my fist until it hurts, then slowly release. The night sky above is clear and studded with stars, as tranquil as it was before this nightmare began in 1914. Somewhere far behind the lines, church bells are ringing in celebration of the armistice. The sound floats over the quiet fields. I breathe in the cold air and let it out in a long plume. Tomorrow, and the day after, and all the days beyond, I will have to figure out how to live on for myself and for those who did not come home. Perhaps I will return to Somerset, to the green hills, and the family I haven't seen in years. Perhaps I will find work, maybe even love, and carve out a life from the ruins. Yet I know part of me will forever remain here, in these scarred battlefields, alongside the comrades who won't see the peace we've earned. For now, I take one tentative step into this new, uncertain future. The guns are silent. The long night of war is finally over. As I walk away from the trenches for the last time, the first light of dawn is creeping into the eastern sky, herald of a tomorrow that is both hopeful and unknowable. And so, with cautious hope tempered by the weight of memory, I move forward, one foot after the other, into the sunrise.